Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. Today we are taking a deep dive into MLA and APA style. And, it's something that I know that a lot of you out there are just itching to know more about. It
Yeah.
can seem a little bit mysterious, a little bit confusing, these style guides. But I gotta say, in preparing for this deep dive, I actually found it pretty interesting.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, there are some really interesting kind of historical details and fun facts that came up along the way. So are you ready to kind of decode this with me?
Oh, I'm so ready. And it's amazing how these two styles, MLA and APA, they've been around for over a century
I know.
and they're still relevant. It's really fascinating how they've managed to evolve and adapt with the times. They're like, I don't know, kind of like living, breathing rule books for good communication.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's start by kind of going back in time, way back to understand where these styles actually came from. And they both came about because there was a need for some order in the academic world, but from totally different places, right?
Oh, absolutely. Context is everything. I mean, MLA, for example,
Yeah.
emerged in 1883. And at that time, there was just this huge explosion in scholarship, especially in literature and languages. I mean,
Mhm.
imagine a world just overflowing with brilliant ideas, but there's no standard way to actually cite all those sources.
Oh my gosh. So it was like the Wild West of citations, just chaos.
Exactly. Total chaos. No way to track down where any of these ideas were coming from.
Yeah.
And that's where the Modern Language Association came in, to try and bring some order to all this.
Yeah.
And so they released the first MLA style sheet. This is in 1951. And the goal was to create clarity, consistency, bring some order to the humanities.
Right, right. That makes total sense. And then over in the science world, APA was kind of brewing its own solution around the same time.
Yeah, just a few years later, actually.
Mm.
It was 1892 when the American Psychological Association, they recognized that there was a need for a very clear and consistent way to share research findings.
Yeah.
Psychology was a pretty young field back then, and they wanted to make sure that research could be replicated, could be compared easily. So it was all about clarity and transparency.
Right. And that's how their first publication manual, the publication manual of the American Psychological Association, was born. And this was published in 1929. And it's interesting that both of these styles, MLA and APA, came about within a decade of each other.
Yeah.
There's got to be something to that, right?
I think it speaks to a larger movement towards standardization in academia as a whole.
Mm.
The world is changing rapidly, knowledge was expanding like crazy, and these guides became essential for everyone to keep up. They created a structure, like a framework, and ensured clarity so that scholars could build on each other's work in a really systematic way.
Yeah, it's like they set the stage for all the collaborative research that we see today. It's amazing. So right from the start, MLA and APA had very distinct purposes,
Oh, for sure.
which reflected the different values and needs of their fields.
Absolutely.
But here's what's, I think, really interesting. They haven't stayed frozen in time.
Right.
Both of these styles have evolved to stay current, which I think is amazing.
It is remarkable. MLA, which started by focusing on printed sources like your books and your journals, has really embraced the digital age.
Uh-huh.
So now, MLA includes detailed guidelines for citing things like websites, blogs, online databases. You can even cite tweets and YouTube videos.
Wow, so even a tweet can be a legitimate source.
It can.
Wow. Okay. So what about APA? How has APA kept up with the times?
APA has also evolved quite a bit. They have updated guidelines on how to handle statistics, how to ensure, ethical research practices. They also really focused on promoting inclusive language, recognizing the need to communicate research respectfully, and make sure that you're not perpetuating biases.
Yeah, I think that's so important for responsible scholarship.
It really is.
Yeah. It's encouraging to see that these guides are really leading the charge for ethical research practices. It's not just about getting the format right. It's about being responsible with information and how we present it.
Okay, so we've established that MLA and APA have these fascinating origin stories and that they've really evolved over time. But what about the practical differences?
Yeah.
Like what actually makes them unique? Yeah, let's get into that.
Yeah, let's dive into that now.
Okay, let's do it. I mean, that's where their individual personalities really come out.
I like that. Personalities.
Yeah.
That's true. Each style has a different vibe. MLA is all about close reading and highlighting the author's voice. And that's why it emphasizes those author page citations within the text.
Yes, exactly. It's like you're examining a text with a magnifying glass, you know?
Yeah.
You're looking at every little detail, and those author-paid citations are like breadcrumbs, leading you back to the exact origin of each idea.
I like that. And then you have APA, which is super focused on precision and the scientific method.
Right.
And it prioritizes the data publication because, of course, in science, knowledge is constantly evolving.
It is. It's like saying, hey, look, this research is from 2023, so it's current and relevant. And you always see that date
Yeah.
very prominently displayed right after the author's name,
Yeah.
both in the in-text citations, and in the references list at the end of your paper.
Right. So it's almost like there's a fundamental difference in philosophy, right? MLA is saying, like, pay attention to who said it and where in the text you can find it. And APA is saying, when was this discovered? Is this information still up to date?
Exactly. And that difference, that really shapes everything, from the in-text citations to the overall structure of your paper.
Okay, I'm ready to get into those details now.
Okay.
Can you walk us through some specific examples of how these styles actually play out in practice?
Absolutely. Let's take a close look at those in-text citations first.
Uh,
Remember that MLA really wants you to pinpoint the exact location of the information, like, within the source. So you often see something like Smith 22 right there in the sentence. So you know exactly where to go back and find that idea.
right, like a direct link back to the page.
Exactly.
But APA takes a different approach.
It does.
It really focuses on the publication year, right? So
Got it.
you're more likely to see something like Smith 2023 woven into the sentence.
Right. And APA puts that date right up front so that you, as the reader, can instantly see how current that information is, how relevant it is, which makes sense in science, where things can change so quickly.
Right, yeah. And that date-focused approach really carries over to the way that you list your sources at the end of the paper too, right? Your works cited page in MLA and your references list in APA.
It does. With MLA, those entries are typically organized alphabetically by the author's last name. It's all about showcasing the authors and their work.
Yeah, so it's like a who's who of the key voices in that field.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But with APA, you'll notice that the references are organized with the date prominently displayed right after the author's name. And this makes it super easy to scan for the most recent research.
Oh, interesting. It's like a timeline of knowledge with the newest discoveries right at the top.
Yes.
Yeah, and this really emphasizes how important it is in APA style to make sure that the research is current and relevant.
Absolutely. Now, if we kind of zoom out a little bit and look at the overall structure of your paper, MLA offers more flexibility. You can organize those sections in a way that makes sense for your argument.
All right, so you have the freedom to create a unique roadmap for your reader, lead them through your analysis in a way that flows naturally.
Exactly. And this works well for essays, literature papers, research in the humanities, where you're exploring ideas, interpreting texts.
Right.
And then you have APA, which has a much more structured approach, right?
Right.
You've got your abstract, your introduction, methods, results, discussion, and each one of those sections has a very specific purpose.
Yeah, APA is all about clarity and making sure that your research can be replicated. It's like, if you're trying to bake a cake, you got to add those ingredients in a certain order, use precise measurements.
Yeah.
It's like APA is like the recipe book for scientific research.
It is.
It ensures consistency and makes sure that other researchers can understand exactly how you did that study.
Exactly. So depending on your field, what you're studying, the research that you're doing, one of these styles is going to be much better fit than the other.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, if you're analyzing literature, you're writing a history essay, MLA is probably going to be your go-to. But if you're conducting experiments, analyzing data, anything in the social sciences, APA is probably going to be the standard.
Right.
Okay. So we've really gotten into the nuts and bolts of in-text citations and overall paper structure. But there's this other layer to these styles that I think is really interesting, and it's the values that they represent. It's not just about, formatting. It's about the principles behind how we communicate knowledge. What are your thoughts on this?
You're so right. It is really easy to get lost in all the technical parts of formatting. But it's essential to remember that these styles are rooted in, bigger academic principles.
Yeah, for example, MLA, with its focus on those author page citations, it's not just about giving credit where it's due. It's about, that close analysis of the text, understanding the nuances of what the author is trying to say, engaging in a dialogue with those ideas.
It's about appreciating the art of language.
Yes.
How it's being used, the cultural context around that piece of writing. And MLA really encourages you to dig deep and grapple with those ideas in the text.
Yes. And APA, with its focus on the date of publication and the very structured reporting, it really highlights how important scientific rigor is, transparency, and of course, doing the research ethically.
Right. It's about making sure that that research is trustworthy and can be built on by others. It's all about contributing to a reliable body of knowledge that is constantly growing.
So in a way, these style guides, which can seem kind of dry at times, actually embody these core academic principles. They're promoting intellectual honesty and responsible scholarship no matter what field you're in.
Absolutely. And you might be thinking, well, once I learn all the rules, I'm good to go.
Right.
But here's the thing. Both MLA and APA, they are constantly evolving.
Oh, right. That's right. We touched on that a little bit earlier. But yeah, that's a good point. It's not like a static rule book that never changes.
No, it's not. And they're constantly adapting to reflect how scholarly communication and technology are changing.
Exactly. I mean, think about the internet. Like, it's completely revolutionized how we access and use information. And both MLA and APA have had to evolve to keep up with that.
They have. They've had to create guidelines for citing all kinds of online sources, websites, blogs, even those social media posts that we were talking about.
Right. It makes you realize that even these really established style guides have to be flexible and adapt to the way that we communicate and share information today.
They do. They have to be relevant.
Right. And it's not just about, keeping up with technology. Both MLA and APA have also been really proactive in addressing issues like clarity and conciseness and avoiding bias in language.
Yes, absolutely. Accurate and inclusive language is an essential part of academic integrity these days.
Yeah.
It's not just about getting the facts right. It's about presenting them in a way that's responsible and respectful.
Yeah. So it's really interesting to see how these style guides are actively shaping how we think about research and how we communicate it in the academic world.
Yeah.
For someone who's just, starting out with MLA or APA, it can seem a little bit overwhelming.
It can.
Like, how do you keep up with all these changes?
Well, the good news is that both the MLA handbook and the APA publication manual are really easy to find, both online and in print. They're incredibly comprehensive. And I got to say, they're actually quite user-friendly.
Oh, good.
You'll find tons of examples and really clear explanations to walk you through everything.
So it's like having a personal citation coach.
It is. And, if you're more of a visual learner, there are tons of really helpful tutorials and resources online that you can check out.
Oh, that's great. And don't forget about your university library.
Yes.
They're an amazing resource.
They are.
And they often have librarians who actually specialize in these citation styles and can provide really personalized guidance.
Absolutely. So, you really don't need to feel lost in the world of MLA and APA. With a little bit of effort and the right resources, anyone can master these styles and navigate academic writing with confidence.
That's great. It sounds like, learning these styles, it's not just about following rules. It's about understanding how knowledge is constructed and how it's shared in different fields.
Exactly. Once you get the principles behind MLA and APA, you start to see them not just as these citation tools, but as gateways to communicating more clearly, doing more credible research and having a much deeper understanding of the academic world.
I like that. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground already.
We have.
From the origins of these styles to the details of, in-text citations and the values that they represent. And I feel like we've just scratched the surface.
We have.
There's always more to discover, isn't there?
There is. MLA and APA, they're constantly evolving. So staying curious and keeping up with those guidelines is really a journey.
Right.
It's not a destination.
Right, and it makes it fun.
It does. It does. It's like those style guides. They're constantly reminding us that knowledge is never static. It's always changing. And the way we communicate that knowledge has to evolve too.
It does.
Now that we've laid this foundation, I think it's time to explore how these principles of MLA and APA can actually be applied outside of academia.
Ooh, that's interesting. So are you saying that learning these styles can be useful even if you're not a student or a researcher?
Absolutely. The core principles behind clear communication, accurate citation, ethical research practices, they're relevant in so many areas of life.
Sure.
Think about MLA's focus on giving credit where credit is due, seamlessly integrating those sources into your work.
Yeah.
That's crucial for any type of writing where you're building on someone else's ideas, even outside of academia.
So whether you're, writing a blog post or or putting together a presentation for work, or even sharing an interesting article on social media, properly acknowledging your sources, it's just a sign of credibility and respect.
It is. It's about being responsible.
Yeah.
No matter where you are, no matter what you're doing.
Right.
And then you have APA with that emphasis on clear, concise language,
Yeah.
logical organization, presenting information visually. These are valuable skills in any field where you have to explain complex ideas.
Absolutely. I mean, imagine trying to understand, I don't know, a marketing report or a financial analysis that's poorly organized or written in this really confusing language. I mean,
Right.
it wouldn't matter how good the ideas are if they're not communicated effectively.
Exactly. APA's guidelines can help you structure your thoughts, present data in a way that's easy to grasp, and ultimately get your message across.
Right. And let's not forget about, the emphasis that APA puts on ethical research practices, the guidelines on plagiarism and data integrity and responsible conduct. That's relevant for anyone who works with information, whether you're a student, a researcher, a journalist, even a business professional.
It is. It really boils down to maintaining integrity, making sure your work is trustworthy. You're building that reputation of being someone who values accuracy.
Yeah.
You present information responsibly.
Exactly. So it seems like these principles, they really go beyond the academic world. They offer these valuable lessons for anyone who, wants to communicate well, ethically, responsibly in this world where we have so much information coming at us all the time.
They do. They're like secret weapons for clear thinking.
I like that.
Yeah, persuasive communication no matter what you do.
Who knew that these, academic style guides could be so versatile?
I know. And I think it's because at their core, they're all about clarity,
Right.
accuracy, and respect for knowledge.
Yeah.
And those are principles that are valuable everywhere.
Absolutely. Okay, so as we wrap up this first part of our deep dive into MLA and APA style, what is the one key takeaway that you want to leave our listener with today?
Okay, well, I would say MLA and APA, they're more than just style guides. They're really frameworks for thinking, for communicating, and engaging with knowledge in a really meaningful and responsible way. And those skills, they are so valuable no matter where you go in life.
That's a great point. They're not just about rules, they're about empowerment.
They are.
They give you the tools to navigate all this information, share your own ideas with confidence, and contribute to the conversation, both in your field and beyond.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Awesome. Well, we are going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll continue our deep dive into MLA and APA style.
Yes, we will. So we're going to get into some really practical examples and tips for using these styles effectively in your own writing. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
When you're writing and you want to bring in other people's ideas and research, well, that's where citations come in. And both MLA and APA have really specific ways of doing that.
Yeah. Citations. It can be a little bit tricky to keep them straight, but I guess that's why we're doing this deep dive, right?
Right. Exactly. So let's start with MLA. MLA uses this thing called a parenthetical citation, and it's super simple. Basically, you just put the author's last name and the page number in parentheses right there in the text.
Oh, okay. So if I was citing a quote from a book by Jane Austen, it would look like Austen 123, right?
Yes, exactly like that. And the cool thing is that it directs the reader right to that specific spot in the book.
Oh, I see. So they can go check it out themselves if they want to.
Exactly. Now, APA is a little bit different. Instead of the page number, APA uses the year the work was published.
Oh, right. Because APA is all about making sure the research is current and up to date.
You got it. So in APA, you'd see something like Austen 1813 in your sentence.
Austen 1813. Got it. Okay, so that's for when you're quoting directly or even paraphrasing an idea from a source. But what about when you want to give a more complete overview of all the sources you used? At the end of your paper.
Ah, yes. That's where your bibliography or reference list comes in.
Right, bibliography for MLA, right.
Yes. MLA calls it the works cited page, and it lists every single source you cited in your paper alphabetically by the author's last name.
Okay, alphabetically, so it's easy to find what you're looking for. Makes sense.
And each entry includes all the essential details about the source, like the author, the title, the publisher, and so on.
Right, so your reader can track down that source if they want to dig deeper. And what about APA? How does their reference list work?
APA calls it the references list, and it's also super organized, but it prioritizes the date of publication.
Of course. Date first, so you can see at a glance how recent the research is.
Precisely. And just like with MLA, each entry provides all the key info about the source. but the format is a little bit different to match that emphasis on dates.
Okay, so we've got citations within the text and then a full list of references at the end. But isn't there also something about formatting the paper itself, like headings and margins and things like that?
Yeah, you're right. Both MLA and APA have specific guidelines for formatting your paper to ensure consistency and readability.
Okay, like what kind of things?
Well, for example, MLA generally prefers a 12-point font, like Times New Roman, and double spacing throughout the entire document.
Right, that makes it easier to read and gives your instructor space to write comments.
Exactly. And with APA, they also have guidelines for font and spacing, but they often require a title page and an abstract, which is a brief summary of your research.
Oh, right, an abstract lets the reader quickly understand the main points of your study.
Exactly. And, it's really these formatting details, along with the citations and reference lists, that create that distinct look and feel for each style.
It's like they each have their own visual language. You can tell right away if a paper is formatted in MLA or APA just by glancing at it.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to pay attention to the specific guidelines for each style, because even small details can make a big difference in how your work is perceived.
So we've talked a lot about the how-to of MLA and APA, the specific rules and formats, but I think it's also important to talk about the why. Like, why do these styles even exist? What's their bigger purpose?
That's such a good question. It's easy to get caught up in the mechanics of citations and formatting, but it's crucial to remember that these styles serve a much bigger purpose.
Like what?
Well, at their heart, MLA and APA are all about promoting academic integrity.
Academic integrity, what does that mean exactly?
It means being honest and ethical in your research and writing. It means giving credit where credit is due, avoiding plagiarism, and representing your work accurately and transparently.
Right, so it's not just about following rules, it's about doing the right thing.
Exactly. And MLA and APA provide a framework for doing just that. By following their guidelines, you're demonstrating your commitment to ethical scholarship and ensuring that your work is credible and trustworthy.
So learning these styles isn't just about avoiding getting points off on an assignment. It's about developing good habits and building a strong foundation for ethical research and writing.
Precisely. And those habits will serve you well throughout your academic career and beyond.
That's a great point. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today, from the nitty-gritty details of citations and formatting to the broader principles of academic integrity. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to touch on something that I think a lot of people struggle with. The fear of making mistakes.
Oh yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
MLA and APA can seem pretty intimidating at first, and it's easy to feel overwhelmed by all the rules.
Exactly. Like, what if you accidentally mess up a citation or forget to indent a paragraph? It can feel like the end of the world.
I know. But honestly, everyone makes mistakes, even seasoned researchers and writers. The key is to not let the fear of making mistakes paralyze you.
So what's your advice for someone who's feeling intimidated by MLA or APA?
First of all, know that it's okay to ask for help. Don't be afraid to reach out to your professors, librarians, or writing center tutors. They're there to support you and answer your questions.
Right. They've seen it all, and they want to help you succeed. What else?
Second, remember that practice makes perfect. The more you work with MLA and APA, the more comfortable you'll become with the guidelines. And the good news is that there are tons of resources available to help you practice, like online quizzes and interactive tutorials.
So don't be afraid to experiment and make mistakes along the way. It's all part of the learning process.
Exactly. And the more you practice, the more confident you'll become in your ability to use these styles effectively. It's funny because when you think about it, MLA and APA, they're not just about citing sources and formatting papers. They're also about clarity, precision, and attention to detail.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Like, those skills are transferable to so many other areas of life, right?
Absolutely. Think about it. Whether you're writing an email, putting together a presentation, or even just organizing your thoughts, being able to communicate clearly and effectively is essential.
And that's something that MLA and APA can help you with, even if you're not writing a traditional research paper.
Exactly. So don't underestimate the power of these styles. They can really help you hone your communication skills and set you up for success in all sorts of contexts.
That's a great takeaway. So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I think the message is clear. Don't be afraid of MLA and APA. Embrace them as tools that can empower you to communicate clearly, think critically, and approach your work with integrity.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a quick break and then come back to explore some specific examples and tips for using these styles in your own writing.
Sounds good to me. Stay tuned, everyone.
So we've talked about how these styles promote academic integrity and clear communication, but, you know, I think it's really interesting how MLA and APA can actually help you even beyond just research papers and essays.
Oh, really? Like how so?
Well, think about it. MLA,
Yeah.
it really emphasizes giving credit where it's due, right?
Right.
And weaving those sources smoothly into your own writing.
Yeah.
And that's a crucial skill no matter what you're writing, even if it's not for school.
Yeah, that's true.
Like imagine you're, I don't know, writing a blog post
Uh-huh.
or creating a presentation for work, or even if you're just sharing something you read in social media,
Yeah.
acknowledging those sources properly shows that you're credible,
Yeah.
you respect the work that went into those ideas.
Right. It's like being a good member of the information community.
Exactly. You're contributing responsibly to the conversation.
I like that. Okay. So what about APA? How does that apply outside of, a research setting?
Well, APA, it really emphasizes clear and concise language.
Yeah.
It's all about that logical organization and presenting information in a way that people can easily understand, even if it's complex.
Right, because it's not enough to just have good ideas.
No.
You have to communicate them well, too.
Exactly. And APA gives you those tools to do that.
Yeah. Okay, so what about ethical research practices? I mean, that seems pretty specific to, a research setting.
Yeah, you might think so, but actually those guidelines on plagiarism, on data integrity and all that,
Uh-huh.
that's important for anyone who works with information.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Whether you're a student, a researcher, you're a journalist, even if you're a business professional,
That's true. Yeah.
you want to make sure your work is trustworthy.
Right. Right.
So it's really about, it's about maintaining that integrity.
Yeah.
And making sure that, you're presenting information in a way that people can trust.
Okay, so it seems like the principles behind MLA and APA really extend far beyond just the academic world.
They do.
They offer valuable lessons for anyone who wants to be a good communicator and be ethical and responsible with information.
I think that's exactly right. They're more than just style guides. They're really like frameworks for thinking and communicating effectively.
It's interesting to think about it that way.
It is.
Yeah.
And those are skills that are valuable in any field.
Okay, so as we wrap up our deep dive into MLA and APA today, what's the one key thing you hope our listeners take away from all of this?
Well, I think the most important thing to remember is that MLA and APA are more than just, these sets of rules.
Uh-huh.
They're really tools that can help you communicate clearly, think critically, and approach your work with integrity.
That's a great point. So they're not just about, avoiding mistakes.
Yeah.
They're really about, like you said, empowering you to be a better communicator and a better researcher.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into MLA and APA style.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I hope you found it helpful, and I hope you'll join us again next time for another deep dive into a fascinating topic. Until then, keep exploring, keep learning, and don't be afraid to cite those sources.